And I want to say that I'm just really grateful to be here tonight to share some thoughts on wise speech as part of our Eightfold Path series. Mary Louise got us started in October outlining the 8 factors of the path. Oh, thank you, Dolly. Perfect. And then Liz and Teresa spoke about the first 2 factors on the path, which are wise view and wise intention. These are often taught together as the wisdom factors of the path. And if you were not able to be present for those talks, they're available. You can go and listen to them on the IMCC website. Wise speech is often taught with wise action and wise livelihood, which are considered the ethics factors of the Eightfold Path. And the final 2 factors are mindfulness and concentration, considered the concentration factors. So though the factors are taught as a path, they interconnect with one another, having no true beginning and no true ending. And each is influenced and supported by the other. Wise speech is also one of the 5 precepts, which serve as guidance for moral conduct for lay people. The other 4 precepts are refrain from killing, refrain from stealing, refrain from overindulgence in sense pleasure, and refrain from intoxicants. So it's pretty clear that the Buddha believed wise speech to be an important practice. Thank you, Dolly. You can take down the image whenever you're ready. But before I say more about wise speech, I want to say how fun it is to be here tonight to talk with you about wise speech. Communication is interbeing on full display. Though I'm speaking and you're listening, your presence has impact on me and how I experience being here. Presence is a powerful form of communication. By speaking and listening, we create something between us and within us. This is true even with our friends on Zoom. With whom I've had the joy of experiencing presence. So it doesn't matter that we're separated in space by feet or miles. We impact one another through our communications. So I just want to say thank you, actually, for being here with me as I express and experience this feeling of awe at this raw experience of interbeing and being able to talk about it. So if you'll indulge me, I'd like to share a little personal background with the Dharma. I was first exposed to the teachings of the Dharma through secular mindfulness. Learning about mindfulness changed so many things for me. I pursued more training and practice and incorporated mindfulness into my therapeutic approach as a licensed clinical social worker. I also teach a course on mindfulness and self-compassion at Mary Baldwin University. But even with the impact of learning mindfulness, I believe that learning about wise speech is probably where I would say I entered the Eightfold Path. To be honest, I didn't really give the ethics factors much attention or consideration at first. I was much more enamored with the wisdom and concentration factors. My thinking was something along the lines of, ethics, something required of every spiritual teaching, telling you what you should and should not do. This felt familiar in an unpleasant way. Maybe some of you have had similar experiences with the teachings of ethics or shoulds. And with time and maybe more wisdom, I came to understand that nothing the Buddha teaches or taught is to be just memorized and followed because he said it. Everything is to be worked for our own understanding. There are not shoulds to be blindly followed, but a map of how to live a life with greater contentment. For when we make wholesome choices, and by wholesome, meaning those that lead to the end of suffering. For when we make wholesome choices, to quote Sharon, we create the conditions in which happiness can arise. The three ethics path factors are actually wholesomeness in action. So in his book, A Whole Life Path, Gregory Kramer explains that the suttas define wise speech first as avoiding unwise or wrong speech. So what is wrong speech? My guess is that you know it when you hear it. In the suttas, wrong speech is defined as false speech, lies, divisive speech, abusive speech, or idle speech. Wise speech is timely speech, true speech, gentle speech, beneficial speech, and speech spoken with friendliness. It is also, according to Kramer, an act of generosity. So the impact of speech or communication comes in many forms, including stories. And maybe you're familiar with this one. It's A Christmas Carol. Christmas Carol. It's a story about what it's like to live without and then with compassion. Scrooge starts out in his story living a life without the three ethics factors. If you'll indulge, let's hear what that was like. Oh, but he was a tight-fisted hand at the grindstone, Scrooge. A squeezing, wrenching, grasping, scraping, clutching, covetous old sinner, hard and sharp as a flint from which no steel had ever struck out generous fire. Secret and self-contained and solitary as an oyster. The cold within him froze his old features, nipped his pointed nose, shriveled his cheeks, stiffened his gait, made his eyes red, his thin lips blue, and spoke out shrewdly in his grating voice. A frosty time was on his head and on his eyebrows and his wiry chin. He carried his own low temperature always about with him. I really love that definition. He carried his own low temperature always about with him. Nobody ever stopped him on the street to say with gladsome looks, "My dear Scrooge, how are you? When will you come to see me?" No beggars implored him to bestow a trifle. No children asked him what it was o'clock. No man or woman ever once in all his life inquired the way to such and such place of Scrooge. Even the blind men's dogs appeared to know him, and when they saw him coming on, would tug their owners into the doorways and up courts, and then would wag their tails as though they said, "No eye at all is better than an eye, evil eye, dark master." But what did Scrooge care? It was the very thing he liked, to edge his way along the crowded paths of life, warning all human sympathy to keep its distance. "Bah," said Scrooge. "Humbug." But sometimes when we're looking at the various aspects of wise speech, we may notice that one particular kind of wrong speech calls our attention more than others when we do this practice. And for me, the invitation to contemplate the practice of not lying is particularly interesting. Never lie. What about when asked to go out to do something, but this body doesn't feel up to going? Familiar thoughts arise. As Sharon told us last week, the mind begins to fill with stories. I'm always saying no. Everyone else is more fun. I'm such a downer. You notice there's a lot of selfing in those statements. To protect this self, there may be a desire to lie. I have other plans. My child is sick. Inviting ourselves not to lie, we respond honestly, authentically. We no longer create stories to defend a self. To be authentic is not that easy. The practice of being authentic opens a space for the possibility that this being has value. If there's nothing that needs to be defended, there's nothing to lie about. No story of not being okay or good enough. With no story of not being enough, shame does not arise. This is what came to me as I contemplated this aspect of wise speech, a deeper understanding of what the Buddha's teachings, the Dharma, feel like instead of just thinking about them. And even in this one teaching, out of the vast number of teachings of the Buddha, freedom can be found. Am I now free of doubt and shame? No, definitely not. The habits of the mind are strong, At the end of the courses I teach at Mary Baldwin, often students say what they learned changed their lives. And I tell them, you will forget. It's what we do. The only way to change a habit is to replace it. That's why we practice every day and every moment, if we can. The invitation to be authentic allows for awareness of our value and an ability to tolerate a higher level of vulnerability in our interactions with others and ourselves. To simply share what is true, to have awareness of the inner luminous self that the Buddha taught is our true nature, which gets covered by, as Sharon talked about, obscurations. It's okay to say no without having to apologize. Once there's an awareness of the truth of how the inner luminous self is, we can more easily work with how we talk to ourselves. This inner wise speech is self-compassion. As Gregory Kramer reminds us, words aim the mind. I also like the reminder that which we water grows. Letting go of the need to be good enough in the eyes of others does not mean there is a lack of concern that what is offered is useful. Truthfulness must come in conjunction with the other aspects of wise speech. This is to help us discern what is the wholesome offering. First and foremost, what is said must do no harm. Doing no harm involves being aware that everything you say or do creates a ripple, both to yourself and to others. Here's a short poem by Danielle Doby. Ripples. When you create a difference in someone's life, you not only impact their life, you impact everyone influenced by them throughout their entire lifetime. No act is ever too small. One by one, this is how to make the ocean rise. Words have consequences. So one practice we can use to help us with our intention for wise speech is the practice of pause. I tell my students at Mary Baldwin that I consider pause to be a kind of superpower. Within the pause, all options can be known and available to us. Before speaking, we take a moment to be with what is arising in our bodies and minds. We can kindly receive what is arising in us, what needs our attention, accept it with a loving heart, and then choose our next step. Pause. As Kramer says, unquiet, we cannot discern what is wholesome. So how about, let's check back in with Scrooge. Now that he has learned the value of compassion and wise speech, notice what body sensations, thoughts, and feelings arise as you listen. Especially listening to the joy Scrooge experiences at this revelation. Yes, and the bedpost was his own. The bed was his own, the room was his own, best and happiest of all. The time before him was his own to make amends in. I will live in the past, the present, and future, Scrooge repeated as he scrambled out of the bed. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. O Jacob Marley, heaven and the Christmas time be praised for this. I say it on my knees, old Jacob, on my knees. He was so fluttered and so glowing with his good intentions that his broken voice would scarcely answer to his call. He had been sobbing violently in his conflict with the spirit, and his face was wet with tears. His hands were busy with his garments all this time, turning them inside out, putting them on upside down, tearing them, mislaying them, making them parties to every kind of extravagance. I don't know what to do, cried Scrooge, laughing and crying in the same breath and making a perfect, oh, here's that word that my family was trying to help me, Laocoon of himself with his stockings. I am as light as a feather. I am as happy as an angel. I am as merry as a schoolboy. I'm as giddy as a drunken man. A Merry Christmas to everybody. A Happy New Year to all the world. Hello, here, whoop, hello. Ha ha ha. Really, for a man who had been out of practice for so many years, it was a splendid laugh, a most illustrious laugh. The father of a long, long line of brilliant laughs. I don't know what day of the month it is, said Scrooge. I don't know how long I have been among the spirits. I don't know anything. I'm quite a baby. Never mind. I don't care. I'd rather be a baby. Hello, whoop, hello. He dressed himself all in his best and at last got out into the streets. The people were by this time pouring forth as he had seen them with the ghost of Christmas present, and walking with his hands behind him, Scrooge regarded every one with a delighted smile. He looked so irresistibly pleasant, in a word, that 3 or 4 good-humored fellows said, "Good morning, sir. Merry Christmas to you." And Scrooge said often afterwards that of all the blithe sounds he had ever heard, those were the blithest in his ears. Some people laughed to see the alteration in him, but he let them laugh and little heeded them, for he was wise enough to know that nothing ever happened on this globe for good, at which some people did not have their fill of laughter in the outset, and knowing such as these would be blind anyway, he thought it quite as well that they should wrinkle up their eyes in grins and have the malady in less attractive forms. His own heart laughed, and that was quite enough for him. So if you would, take another moment to reflect on how that was for you, listening to this joy, this experience of sheer happiness, and then it flowing to everyone after learning the wondrousness of kindness and compassion. And also take a moment to reflect on a time in which you spoke kindly, truthfully, and generously to others or to yourself. Notice what arises. How does the body feel? Perhaps there is a loosening or a warmth, the beginnings of a smile. And if there's no real response, just noticing that as well. There is, of course, no right way to feel. there's so much to say. I mean, communication, there's so many levels. So thank you again for just letting me have a few moments to share and communicate here with you tonight. I want to share a quote from Thich Nhat Hanh. There's a saying in Vietnamese, it doesn't cost anything to have loving speech. We only need to choose our words carefully, and we can make other people happy. To use words mindfully, with loving kindness, is to practice generosity. We can make many people happy just by practicing loving speech. I want to just say one more personal thing too, because it's profound. I had an experience, to me it was profound, months ago. The most lovely person says to me in the grocery store, you know, your hair is so pretty today. And I still remember, right? So the little things matter. So, well, thank you all for being here for my very first offering here. I appreciate that so much. I will always remember that as special. And so and Zoomers, thank you so much. May all beings experience kindness. May all beings be peaceful and happy and come to the end of suffering. Thank you.